Some things sound like lies until fate decides it's time to prove they're real. You know those kinds of scenes you see in a movie, feel moved by, but then think, that's just a cheap script. That would never happen in real life. Yeah, I thought that too. Until I saw it with my own eyes the day a millionaire stopped the most expensive car in town because of an invisible woman, the kind the whole world makes a point of not seeing. And what he saw in her arms, well, at that moment, there was no Ferrari, no status, no private security that could hold him back. But before I tell you what was in her arms, you need to understand who he was and who she was. And if you're someone who loves a good story, hit that like button and subscribe, or you'll miss the rest of this tale. That feels like fiction, but is real, the kind that hurts and transforms. His name was Enrique Duarte, 48 years old, owner of a network of private clinics spread across 4 states. Also the owner of a calculated coldness that the market called strategic vision, but that I, with my old man's instinct, always called a frozen soul. Enrique grew up poor, watched his mother die waiting in line at a public hospital when he was still a kid, and he made the promises to himself that he would never depend on anyone again, and that poverty, to him, was synonymous with failure. He became a businessman, a billionaire, but also became a man who never looked sideways. He stepped over those who asked for help and said that charity is a crutch for failures, and her, no one knew her name. She had been living on a sidewalk near Perguntar for months, curled up in a corner of cardboard, with disheveled hair covering her face and a torn blanket wrapped around her body. Some said she was a drug addict, others that she had escaped from a psychiatric clinic. Most didn't say anything. They just looked away. She was the kind of person the city learns to ignore, invisible, despised. But that day, that invisible woman was going to scream without opening her mouth. Ironically, the one who heard her was the man with the deafest heart fate could have chosen. Enrique was on his way to a meeting when traffic suddenly stopped. He started honking, cursing from behind the closed window. That's when he saw her in the corner of the sidewalk, that homeless woman. A group of boys laughing, mocking, kicking the cans around her, as she, motionless, as if she weren't even there, but trembling, not from fear, from cold. Enrique was going to move on. His hand was already going back to the wheel when one of the boys kicked off her blanket. At that moment, something fell from her arms, something small, something that moved, and Enrique froze. He opened the car door, something he never did, and walked slowly, as if in a dream. There, in the middle of the dirty cardboard, was a baby. Yes, a baby, newborn, naked, trembling, eyes shut, face dirty, with grime and dried tears. And her? She just pulled the baby back into her arms and looked at Enrique, not like someone asking for help, but like someone who had already given up. That was the first time in years Enrique felt his heart skip a beat. And that, my friend, was just the beginning. There's silence, and then there's that silence that screams, and that's the one that took over the avenue when the baby appeared. Enrique stood frozen, mouth slightly open, like his brain was trying to process what his eyes didn't want to accept. That woman, dirty, ignored, spit on by the city, was holding a baby, a newborn. The kind of scene that explodes on tabloid headlines. Homeless woman with child on the street. But no one there took out a phone. No one called the police. No one ran. You know why? Because deep down, no one knew what to do. And Enrique, even less. Is that yours? He asked, voice hoarse with disbelief. She didn't respond, just covered the baby with the rest of the tattered blanket, like someone protecting a diamond wrapped in rags. Her hands trembled, but not just from the cold, from hunger, fear, exhaustion, all at once, and more. Enrique swallowed hard, looked at the boys still standing there awkwardly laughing, and shouted in a dry voice, "Get out of here." The boys ran like cockroaches dodging a flying slipper, and then silence returned. But this time, it was different, heavier. Enrique didn't know if he should look at her, the baby, the ground. He just knew something inside him had cracked, like the ice he'd built for years suddenly shattered. Do you need help? He asked, in a tone he didn't even recognize in himself. She finally raised her eyes, and, look, it wasn't anger, nor pleading, just exhaustion, a look that said, help now for what? And then she spoke, her first words, plenty. People offered me help, sir, but it always came with conditions. Steal, sell, stay quiet, or disappear. Enrique felt a punch in the chest without a hand. I'm not like them. She gave a sad little laugh. Every man in a suit says that. At that moment, the baby cried, a weak cry, almost a whimper. From hunger, Enrique moved to get closer, but she pulled back protectively. Don't touch him. He still has the right to believe in someone. That was the final straw. Enrique felt his eyes sting. It was like that baby was speaking to him from a place he had buried long ago. His childhood, his mother in the hospital line, everything he had sworn to forget. What's his name? Enrique asked, softly. Samuel. The name cut the air like lightning. Enrique turned pale. Samuel was the name of the brother he lost at age 7, dead from pneumonia, because they couldn't afford antibiotics. And in that instant, the coldest millionaire in the city didn't know if he was standing on the sidewalk or drowning in a nightmare from the past. But here's the detail. What happened next was even stranger. The woman stretched out her arm and handed him the baby. Here, hold him for a bit. Maybe you'll hear your own heart. Enrique hesitated, but took him. And when he held that tiny, fragile body, full of life and abandonment, it was as if he embraced the boy he hadn't seen in decades. And then, my friend, Enrique started to cry. In the street, in the middle of the avenue, with a baby in his arms, the king of coldness became human. But fate wasn't done, not even close, because what he would discover that very night about that woman would tear apart everything he thought he knew about right, wrong, and life itself. There are things we bury thinking we've forgotten them, but the heart, that sly thing, has its own memory, and when it decides to dig, it digs deep. Enrique got back in the car with the baby in his arms. The woman followed right behind, hesitant, like someone who doesn't trust, but also has no choice. The driver's eyes widened when he saw them. He opened the back door, but Enrique didn't say a word, just got in and gestured, drive. It was the first time in years he had let a stranger into his car. He didn't even let his own nephews touch his Ferrari. But now, there were no rules, no protocol. Where are we going? She asked in a low, nearly disappearing voice. Enrique replied without looking. To the hospital. No need. He's just hungry. I'll manage. Enrique turned to her, irritated. Manage, woman. The baby's skin is turning purple from the cold. You have a fever. And that blanket smells like mold. She shrugged defensively. Better mold than cowardice. Enrique closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and stayed quiet. The car sliced through the streets like a ghost. No one spoke. Only the baby's faint whining broke the silence from Enrique's lap. When they arrived at the private hospital, one that Enrique himself owned, the nurses rushed over. But when they saw the woman, they wrinkled their noses. All it took was one look from him, and the staff turned into a Hollywood production. Baby into the incubator. Quick exams. Emergency assessment. Enrique stood outside the neonatal ICU, arms crossed, heart shattered. She, seated in the waiting room, held a trembling cup of water. That's when he asked, "What's your name?" She looked at him, long and slow, no rush. I've been called everything, whore, crazy, vagrant. But the name my mother gave me before she died was Livia. Enrique turned pale. The cup slipped from his hand. Livia. He repeated the name like someone seeing a ghost in the mirror. The Livia he had known as a teenager. The girl from the next street over, who disappeared one day without a trace, who he loved. Yes, that woman was the same one, but time had been cruel, had erased her features, dirtied the memory, but the eyes were the same. Livia, from San Joaquin, he asked, voice trembling. She widened her eyes. The tension thickened the air. How do you know that? Enrique stepped forward. It's me, Enrique, Dona Elsa's son from the bakery. Time froze. Livia slowly stood, her face in shock, a mix of rage, disbelief, and pain. Enrique, the Enrique who, she didn't finish the sentence. Her mouth trembled. Enrique swallowed hard. What happened to you? Livia looked down and said, voice breaking, what always happens to poor girls born in forgotten neighborhoods? Enrique didn't answer, because he knew that behind that silence, there was a whole hell waiting to be told, and that hell would change everything he thought he knew about her, about himself, and even about the baby. What we call the past is sometimes not memory, but a wound, and a poorly healed wound has a voice. It screams, even if no one listens. Enrique and Livia stood face to face in the hospital's white room. Just them. No nurses, no protocol, no masks, staring at each other as if time had been run over between them. I thought you were dead. Livia, Enrique whispered, eyes filled with tears. She let out a dry laugh, but it was the kind of laugh that burns, that scorches inside. I did die. They just forgot to bury me. Enrique stepped closer. He wanted to say something but didn't know what. He wanted to listen, but wasn't sure if he could handle it. Livia drew a long breath, like someone choosing to tear open her soul rather than keep swallowing pain. You want to know what happened to me, Enrique? I got pregnant at 16 by an older man, a bastard who promised me heaven and left me with hell in my belly. Enrique clenched his fists, felt the memory sting. I tried to tell my mother. She kicked me out, said I was a disgrace to the family, that I was just like my aunt who turned into a woman of the streets. And then I slept 2 nights on a bus station bench. Then they took me to a shelter run by nuns. They gave me food, sure, but they also gave me silence, and the baby they took from me. Enrique's breath caught, said it was better that way, that a girl like me could never raise a child properly. They said it was for adoption, but I never signed anything. They just drugged me. She bit her lips, eyes watering. When I woke up, my baby was gone, and with him, my will to live. Enrique sank into the chair, his hand over his face. His chest felt like concrete. After that, I became a number in hospitals, shelters, psych wards. I was institutionalized 3 times. They said I was unstable, that I made things up. But it wasn't madness, Enrique. It was longing for a child I never even met. Silence felt like lead. Enrique was torn to pieces inside, but what he was about to say was even worse. Livia, the baby, Samuel, she looked at him, afraid of what was coming. Enrique took a deep breath and let it out. The name isn't a coincidence. And this baby isn't just any baby. She froze, like time had turned her to stone. Only her eyes moved. What are you talking about? Enrique stared at her, eyes red. Samuel is my grandson. Her mouth opened slowly. What do you mean? My son died in an accident a year ago. His wife was pregnant. Her family never liked me and ran off with the baby. Disappeared. I tried to find them. Hired investigators, police, press. Nothing. And you think this baby is? I don't think. Livia. I know. The world spun. Livia stood slowly, legs weak, breathing shaky. You're telling me the son of the woman who took mine is gone, and now the child of your child ended up in my arms. Enrique didn't reply. She cried in silence, with a soul torn apart from the inside. Life is a cruel joke, Enrique, but this time I'll be the one laughing. Enrique stepped forward, touched her shoulder. No, this time we laughed together or cried together, but alone, never again. But they had no idea that what connected them was much greater than they thought, and that baby still carried one more secret, a secret capable of changing everything they thought they knew. They say when you go looking, you find, but no one warns you that what you find might be worse than what you lost. Enrique didn't sleep that night. He sat in a corner of the NICU, watching the incubator where little Samuel breathed with effort, his body still fragile, but alive, stubborn, as if he had come into the world determined to survive even without asking to be born. Livia stayed too, sitting silently, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was full of questions, full of memories she'd rather not recall, but now couldn't avoid anymore. Enrique had a DNA test done urgently. He had contacts, influence, money, and a desperation even he couldn't explain. It was more than curiosity. It was need. Urgent. 2 days later, the result came in. The envelope was handed directly to him. His hands trembled as he read. Genetic compatibility confirmed. 99.9% probability of biological relation with the late Enrique Duarte Filho. Samuel was indeed his grandson. Enrique dropped into the chair. He cried, but it was a different kind of cry. The cry of someone who had found what he didn't even know he was searching for. But the world, my friend, never gives you clean joy. Because while he celebrated, the door opened. Livia walked in, slowly. I received this from a social worker, she said, handing over a folder. Enrique took it. Inside, documents, photos, a report, and written there, in cold bureaucratic letters, voluntary surrender record of minor, Samuel Oliveira, son of Lucia Ramos. Enrique froze. Lucia, the mother who supposedly abandoned the baby, your son's wife. Enrique, his world spun again. His face turned pale. But how? Livia looked straight at him. You know what this says? That she didn't run away. That she tried to give the baby up for legal adoption, but was blocked. And then she vanished, missing to this day. And do you know who filed the request? Enrique's eyes widened. Who? Her mother. Your ex-mother-in-law. The one you always said you wanted nothing to do with. Enrique felt old memories hit like hammers. This doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. They hid the pregnancy from you. And when the daughter wanted to do the right thing, the mother stopped her. And now, no one knows where Lucia is. Enrique shook his head, trying to piece the truth together like a puzzle missing pieces. So, this baby was thrown away for revenge, or he was saved, who knows? They stared at each other. The DNA had confirmed a blood tie, but the heart said the stronger bond between them was something else entirely. Enrique, what if this baby isn't just your grandson? What do you mean? She lowered her eyes, swallowed hard. What if he's my grandson? Enrique froze. What? The woman who disappeared. Lucia. She was born in the same hospital where they took my child, on the same date, at the same time. And guess what? Her surname matches the nurse who drugged me that night. The silence stabbed deep. Enrique couldn't breathe. You're saying? Enrique, what if Lucia was my stolen daughter? The room went silent. Only the soft beep of the heart monitor filled the air. In that moment, the strangers united by abandonment discovered they might have been family all along, without knowing it. But to be sure, they'd have to open the deepest grave of all, the system that erased entire lives in silence. Some people think orphanages are places of refuge, but those who live there know that refuge is sometimes just a pretty name for abandonment. Enrique and Livia sat in front of a social worker. The hospital had recommended her. They said she was trustworthy, experienced, knew everything. She was a thin, elderly woman, her white hair tightly tied in a bun. She held an old, yellowed folder. You want to know about Lucia Ramos and a possible baby switch in the 90s? She asked. Eyes sharp. Enrique nodded. Livia trembled. I'm not authorized to talk about all cases, but there are things I never forgot. She opened the folder. Inside were files, records, handwritten notes. Back then, many babies born to poor mothers were registered as without family ties, especially when the mothers arrived unconscious or drugged, but not all of them were. Some were drugged intentionally. Enrique frowned. What do you mean? It was a scheme. Clandestine clinics, young, vulnerable mothers. When the baby was born, if it was healthy, it vanished, registered with a different name, handed over for special adoption. Livia couldn't hold back tears. And what happened to the mothers? They were institutionalized, labeled as emotionally unstable. Often, fake diagnoses were made, forged signatures, fake medical reports. Enrique was stunned. That's a crime, yes, but back then, it was routine. And almost no one cared. After all, they were poor girls. Who would listen? She closed the folder, looked at them. The girl named Lucia Ramos was registered by someone named Celia Ramos, a nurse. No father listed. Data was vague. There was no official adoption. But years later she appeared in a shelter, aged 8, with no memory of her early years. Enrique felt his stomach turn. And this Celia disappeared from the system in 2002, listed as missing. But there are signs she was one of the coordinators of these informal adoptions. Livia gripped the chair to keep from collapsing. So, it's possible. The social worker nodded. More than possible. It's likely. But to confirm, you'll need another test. To compare Livia's DNA with Lucia's. Enrique's heart pounded. But no one knows where Lucia is. Silence. Then the social worker dropped a sentence like a boulder. I do. Their eyes widened. What do you mean? She was admitted to a public hospital 3 weeks ago. Severe hemorrhage. She had fake documents, but I recognize her face. She's still in a coma. Name on record, Maria do Socorro. Livia jumped up. I want to see her. The social worker nodded. Let's go now. And that's how, my friend, fate began stitching together the shattered pieces of two broken stories, a despised woman, a remorseful millionaire, and a baby Who might be the missing link between 3 generations separated by a cruel system? But what Livia would see at the hospital was not what she expected, because when she reached the hospital bed, the woman lying there wasn't a stranger. She was someone she had seen before. The public hospital hallway had that acidic smell of expired disinfectant and stacked up time. Flickering fluorescent lights, voices in the distance. People waiting for a miracle on plastic chairs. Livia walked ahead. Her legs were trembling, but she kept moving. Enrique followed close behind, carrying a silence so heavy it felt like a casket floating in the air. They reached the red zone. Emergency. The social worker pointed. Bed 18, right there. Livia took a deep breath and walked in. What she saw made her world spin. The frail body, the bruised face, a bandaged forehead, a cut above the eye, thin arms, yellowed fingers, and the hair still showed dark brown strands, though tangled. The intubated woman was still, but alive, and Livia froze. My God, Enrique stepped closer. Do you know her? Livia didn't answer immediately. She just stared at that face, like someone trying to pull something from the depths of memory that had always been there. Then she murmured, "It's her." Her who? The nurse, Celia. Enrique froze. Are you sure? Livia nodded. I was 16, groggy, but that face, that chin, those cold eyes, she was the one who drugged me. She was the one who took my baby. Enrique stepped back, but they said Celia vanished in 2002. The social worker approached, holding a medical file. The registered name is fake, but the face matches. And more, a former employee from a clinic we investigated has already confirmed that Celia used a fake identity in her final years. Livia looked at the intubated woman. So she might be the key to everything? She knows where my daughter was taken. More than that, said the social worker. She may have raised the girl in her own way, hidden from the world. Like an illegal daughter. Enrique sat down. The world spun around him. That means the woman my son fell in love with, the mother of my grandson, may have been raised by the same woman who destroyed Livia's life. The knot in his chest turned to stone, and that, without knowing it, my son may have fallen in love with the child of a crime. Livia stepped closer to the bed, held the woman's hand. Look at me, Celia. Look closely. You stole my life, but God found a way to sew it all back together. A tear rolled down Livia's face, but what no one expected came. Next stop, because in that instant, the intubated woman moved her fingers. Enrique's eyes widened. She's waking up. The monitor beeped. Her heart rate spiked. Breathing accelerated. Nurse. The social worker shouted, Bed 18. Has neurological response. In the midst of nurses rushing, tubes being adjusted, and doctors appearing from all sides, Livia whispered a single question into the unconscious woman's ear. Where is my daughter? The answer would come with the next heartbeat. But what Livia and Enrique were about to discover wasn't just about a lost daughter. It was about a live planet inside their own family. They say when a soul wakes up from a long silence, it doesn't speak, it bleeds. And that's how the woman in bed 18 returned. Celia opened her eyes, slowly, like someone who didn't recognize her own body. The ceiling lights flickered. The fourth dripped in silence. And there, at her side, holding her hand, was Livia, the woman she thought she'd never see again. Celia's gaze took time to focus, but when it did, it froze. She tried to pull her hand away, but her weak body didn't obey. Livia didn't let go. I know who you are, Celia. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide with panic. Enrique stepped closer, but it was Livia who spoke. She spoke like someone crossing the desert thirsty for justice. You took my child from me. You lied, drugged me, locked me up, erased me, and then you raised my daughter like she was yours. Celia tried to speak, but couldn't. A breathing tube blocked her voice, but her eyes were screaming. Enrique handed her a clipboard and a pen. Write the truth, everything. With difficulty, Celia gripped the pen. Her hands trembled. She began writing, letter by letter, as if each word hurt more than the last. She was born on the 12th. She was yours. She was perfect. No one came for her. I was alone. I took her, registered her as mine. Livia read it with her soul being shredded. So, it's true. Celia closed her eyes. A tear slid down. Enrique asked, Lucia, is Livia's daughter? Celia wrote, yes. Livia staggered, had to sit down. Her whole body trembled. But it wasn't rage. It was relief, not the kind of truth that hurts, but sets you free. And what did you do with her as she grew up? Another reply, raised her, alone, but hid everything. She never knew. When she found out she was adopted, she ran away. She was pregnant, said she'd find her real mother. Livia cried silently. She tried to find me. Henri cried too, but his pain was guilt. And I thought she was just rebellious. I never understood. The social worker entered with new information. Confirmed. The identity of Maria do Socorro is fake. Fingerprints match an old file of Celia Ramos. We've already submitted the case to the public prosecutor's office. Enrique looked at her and Lucia, still in a coma, but stable. If the DNA tests confirm her relation to Livia, she will be officially recognized as her daughter. Livia looked at Celia. You stole a life from me, but now I'm giving you the truth, and that will hurt more than any punishment. She let go of the woman's hand, stood up, and went straight to the nursery. There, little Samuel slept in a transparent crib, surrounded by wires, and hoped Enrique followed. They stood side by side. He has your eyes, and my son's heart, Enrique said. Livia smiled, tired, but alive. And now he has a grandmother and a grandfather who won't let anyone take him away again. But fate, still, had one hidden card. Because that very night, while everyone slept, Lucia's heart began to beat stronger, and her eyes began to open. It was late at night. The hospital slept in silence, broken only by the beeping of machines and the distant sound of an ambulance arriving. Livia sat beside the incubator, her eyes fixed on Samuel. The baby slept deeply, as if unaware of the storm that had brought him into the world, as if he were waiting for someone to wake up so that the story could finally be pieced together. Enrique arrived holding the coffees. He sat beside her. Good news, he said. Lucia has started showing signs of consciousness. Livia swallowed hard. I'm scared. Scared of what? Of looking at her and her not recognizing me. Of saying I'm your mother and she turning her face away. Or worse, hating me. Enrique took a deep breath. Not hate. At most, she'll ask why you took so long. Livia gave a faint, painful laugh. And what will I say? That I was drugged? That they called me crazy? That they stole my motherhood like someone steals a package in the mail? Enrique took her hand. You'll say that, despite everything, you never stopped searching, even if it was inside yourself. She nodded, stood up, and went. The recovery room was cold. The lights were dimmed. Lucia was there, still intubated, but with her eyes half open, blinking, as if trying to figure out whether she was alive or dreaming. Livia entered slowly. The sound of her steps echoed on the floor. She got closer, felt her heart racing, knelt beside the bed, touched her daughter's hand. Lucia, the young woman, turned her head. Her eyes moved slowly. They focused on Livia. That's when Livia pulled from her pocket an old necklace, cheap metal, a heart-shaped pendant with the letter L. They gave you this when you were born. I never knew what they'd done to you, but I kept it. And now I know. It was always yours. Lucia's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't speak, but her tears said everything. Livia leaned in. It's me, my daughter. I'm the woman who loved you, even without knowing your name. I'm the mother you were looking for. Lucia blinked twice, and a single tear rolled down. Enrique appeared at the door. He saw the scene in silence, and that was the moment Lucia slowly raised her hand. Weak, but determined, she pointed to her belly. She wants to know about the baby, said Enrique. Livia smiled, her voice trembling. He's fine, strong, healthy, just like you. Enrique stepped closer. His name is Samuel. Remember you said that, if it were a boy, you wanted him to have a prophet's name. Lucia closed her eyes, but a smile appeared on her face. And there, for the first time, 3 generations recognized each other. A mother who found her daughter, a daughter who discovered the truth, and a baby who, without knowing, brought back together what the world had separated. But there was still more, much more, because deep in that hospital, someone from the past was also waking up, and it wasn't Celia. The hospital felt like it was breathing more calmly that morning. Lucia remained in recovery. Samuel was gaining weight, and Enrique, for the first time in many years, woke up without checking his phone. He woke up staring out the window, thinking that maybe true wealth was something else entirely. Maybe it was what he was finally starting to hold, even with hands calloused from ambition. Livia was in the cafeteria, weak coffee with bread and margarine, but with a different taste. The taste of someone who's alive, whole, even after being shattered for years. But at that moment, just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a name reappeared. Enrique was leaving the neonatal wing when a security guard approached him. "Dr. Enrique, there's a man outside asking for Miss Livia." "Who?" He said his name is Reginaldo. Enrique turned pale. That name was a scar in his memory. Reginaldo, the biological father of the baby who had been taken from Livia when she was 16. The same man who had disappeared, the one rumored, back then, to have ties to illegal clinics. Enrique took a deep breath. "Where is he?" "At the front gate. Says he needs to see his grandson." Enrique went personally, and there he was, Dr. Eginaldo. An aged face, patchy beard, faded t-shirt, but the look in his eyes, that same smug gaze of a man who always thought the world was his game. Well, if it isn't the hospital tycoon," he said, smirking. "What do you want?" Enrique was blunt. "I heard Livia's alive, and that baby, well, he might be my grandson too." Enrique crossed his arms. "After over 20 years. You decide to show up." Reginaldo shrugged. "It's never too late for family, right? What? Now you guys are gonna be the morality club?" Enrique didn't blink. "You want money. I want what's mine, and I'll go as far as I need, including the courts." Enrique gave a dry smile. "You sure you want to open that can of worms?" Reginaldo stared, silent for a second. Enrique stepped closer. His voice dropped an octave. "I know what you did. I know about the clinic. I know about the dirty money. I know every baby that disappeared with your name involved. And more. I know there's a warrant for your arrest since 2004. Reginaldo's smirk faded. "Is that a threat?" "No. It's a promise. Leave now, or walk out in handcuffs." Reginaldo hesitated, spat on the ground, turned his back, but before leaving, he threw one last line over his shoulder. "That kid, he's gonna grow up, and he'll want to know who his real granddad is." Enrique stood still, fist clenched. It wasn't fear. It was rage. It was the past trying to kidnap the future again. Hours later, he told Livia everything. She listened in silence, but in the end, she said, "He's just a shadow, Enrique, and shadows don't have roots." But neither of them knew Reginaldo had already left behind a storm, because later that same afternoon, a hospital assistant handed Livia an envelope. Inside, a fake birth certificate stating he was Samuel's legal father, signed, filed, and dated before the baby was even admitted to the NICU. What did it mean? It meant he could file for custody, and their time was running out. Enrique held the fake birth certificate as if it were on fire. The paper trembled in his hands. But what burned most was inside him. "This is impossible," he said, voice cracking with anger. Livia, beside him, looked petrified. He signed as the father before the baby was even admitted. The social worker confirmed with a sad nod. "Old document, dated to weeks before you found the baby on the street, but it was only registered now at the notary office, and unfortunately, it's legally valid until proven otherwise." Enrique ran a hand over his face, a gesture of fatigue or desperation. But how did this get into the system? He likely bribed someone, or had it ready for years. Maybe he was just waiting for the perfect chance to use it. Livia was breathing heavily. "And what does this mean?" The social worker hesitated, then answered, "It means that, legally, he can request custody of the child. At worst, he could win, if he proves minimal stability in claims. Biological connection, he could take the boy." Enrique slammed his fist on the table. "He's never even touched Samuel, never changed a diaper, never brought a bottle. That doesn't matter. What counts is the paper." Livia stood up. "Then we'll show what really counts. The truth. Truth isn't enough." Enrique muttered, "We need proof, fast." Then the social worker looked at them with a worried expression. "Do you want to hear the worst part?" Enrique and Livia nodded. "If he files for custody tomorrow, and you don't have anything official to disprove the document, the judge can grant an emergency ruling." Livia dropped into her chair. "He can take Samuel from us, just like that, in 72 hours. The silence that followed was like a vacuum. Enrique paced in circles, thinking, grinding his teeth. "We need to prove he forged the document, or that he has a criminal record. I'm sure he was involved in those illegal adoptions." "He was there at the clinic," said Livia, eyes filling with tears. But do you have proof? The social worker asked gently. Silence. Then Enrique, as if awakening from a nightmare, raised his eyes. Celia, what? Celia can destroy everything. She was at the center of the scheme. If she says he was involved, the certificate loses all validity. The court will annul it. Livia hesitated, but she's weak, barely woke up, can hardly breathe. Enrique looked at her, determined. But she's alive, and she's the only one who can stop this tragedy. Just then, the social worker's phone rang. She answered. Her face turned tense. It's there. Hold on. Silence. Then she looked at them and said, Celia went into cardiac arrest. Livia's soul collapsed. Enrique felt his knees weaken, and if she dies, then the only witness who could save your grandson dies with her. But fate hadn't played its final card yet. Because in the hospital hallway, Lucia was standing, wearing a borrowed coat for in her arm, but standing strong. I heard everything, she said, her voice hoarse. And if you need someone to tell the truth, then let me tell you what Celia said before she blacked out. The hospital corridor froze. Even the air seemed to pause. Lucia was there, standing, eyes sunken from having crossed death and returned. But her voice came with the strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. Celia told me everything, she said, before she collapsed. Enrique stepped forward. What did she say? Lucia looked at her mother, then at them both. She said, she never wanted to raise me. She just hid me. I was a bargaining chip. She was paid to disappear with me. And the one who paid was Reginaldo. Livia covered her mouth. Enrique's eyes widened. What do you mean? He paid. Yes, he got my mother pregnant. Knew it would be a problem, so he sold his own child. Paid Celia to vanish with the baby, but she tricked him. Disappeared with me and never gave me back. Raised me her way, in silence, until I grew up and started asking questions. Livia cried quietly, but it was a different kind of cry now. One of reconnection. She told me she tried to return me, but she was afraid. Afraid of Reginaldo, because he was involved in something. Big. Children disappearing, false identities, human trafficking. Enrique was stunned. She said that, word for word. And she said more, that the certificate he presented for Samuel was forged using an old model, copied from another baby, from 2001. Enrique looked at the social worker. Can that be tracked? Yes. And if confirmed, the document becomes invalid, and he'll be charged with fraud. Livia grabbed the phone, called her lawyer. I want an emergency ruling today, based on this statement, and I want that birth certificate annulled. Now, while she spoke, Lucia approached the incubator. She stood there, looking at her son. I ran because I was afraid I'd turn out like my mother, afraid I'd fail, afraid of being weak. But now I understand. She was never weak. She survived. Livia came up behind her, hugged her from behind. You have my strength, and the love they stole from us. Now we give to Samuel in double. Enrique wiped his eyes, trying to hide a. Then the social worker's phone rang again. She answered, listened, and looked at the three of them, confirmed Reginaldo's certificate is fake. The notary acknowledged the forgery, and more. The public prosecutor just opened an investigation against him. Arrest warrant issued. The silence that followed was light. It was relief. It was as if the whole hospital exhaled together. Enrique looked at the two women. Come here, he said, and the three of them embraced. Livia, Lucia, and Enrique. A triangle rebuilt amid tragedy. But fate still had a hidden gift, because that night, while everyone slept, little Samuel opened his eyes for the first time and looked straight at his grandmother. And in that gaze was more life than all the words in the world. The clock read 3:12 a.m. The hospital slept. The lights were dimmed, the hallways empty. Only the sound of monitors filled the silence with a steady rhythm, as if even the machines knew something had changed. Livia woke from a nap with a strange feeling. It was a noise. It was instinct. She got up quietly, barefoot, and walked to the neonatal ICU. And there, when she pressed her face to the glass of the incubator, she saw it. Samuel had his eyes open. He didn't blink. He just looked. Dark, eyes deep, eyes that seemed old for such a tiny body. Livia covered her mouth with her hand. Her heart raced. She knelt before the crib, leaned her face to the glass, and whispered, Hi, my love. The baby kept looking, as if he understood, as if he knew. Enrique arrived seconds later, drawn in by that kind of call that doesn't come from sound but from blood. His eyes are open. Livia nodded, eyes wet. Lucia followed soon after, still wearing her hospital gown. When she saw her son awake, she held her chest out, silence, tears, and a fragile smile, but full. He's saying he wants to live, she said, and that he wants to live with us. Enrique knelt down, placed his palm on the glass. This boy has no idea what he's already fixed. Livia looked at him. Fix what? Enrique sighed. I spent my life calculating profits, risks, expansion, but I never calculated the soul. This baby taught me that what truly matters has no commas or dollar signs. Lucia hugged them both. You didn't lose motherhood, and I didn't lose mine. We just needed time, courage, and a whole lot of love. The next morning, the judge granted temporary custody of Samuel to Lucia. With shared guardianship with Livia and Enrique, Reginaldo was arrested trying to flee the state. And that very day, Enrique did something no one expected. He called a press conference. Livia and Lucia stood beside him, in front of cameras. Without shame, without fear, Enrique faced the microphones. For years, I built a fortune helping bodies heal, while my soul rotted in silence. But today I learned the value of a life no one wanted to see. A despised homeless woman, a stolen mother, an abandoned baby. And me, the man who thought he knew everything, but knew nothing. So I'm announcing today the creation of the Samuel Foundation, a shelter for homeless mothers with medical, psychological, and legal support. And in the name of my granddaughter, my daughter, and my grandson, I promise no woman will ever scream alone like Livia once did. Lucia took the microphone. My name is Lucia. I was raised by a criminal. I became a mother before I understood what it meant to be a daughter. But today, I am free because love found the truth, and the truth set us free. In the crowd, a journalist wiped her tears. A cameraman lowered his lens to breathe. And when it was all over, the three walked out embraced side by side, heads held high. And little Samuel, in his mother's arms, smiled for the first time. 2 months had passed since the day all of Brazil heard Samuel's name, the story that began with a screeching break and a baby in the arms of an invisible woman, became headline news, became a book, became a rebirth, but more than news that became a revolution. The Samuel Foundation was inaugurated in an old abandoned house downtown, the same place where Livia used to sleep wrapped in cardboard. Enrique bought the property and restored every wall with his own hands, literally. He put the suit aside, picked up a bucket, cement, sweat. If her pain was born on this floor, then the healing will be born here too, he said. Livia became the foundation's director, but not for the title. For her experience, she knew what it was like to be called crazy, unworthy, a nobody. And now she was the one reaching out her hand. Women arrived from all over, pregnant, wounded, alone, and there they found a place where silence wasn't punishment, it was welcome. Lucia graduated in nursing, went back to school. She worked the night shift at the foundation, caring for mothers who arrived scared, and in her spare time, she wrote letters she would one day read to her son, telling him everything, but everything wrapped in love. No hate, no fear, because she understood the boy didn't need the pain she carried. He needed the truth. With a lab. Enrique, once the owner of clinics that denied care to anyone without insurance, now opened his clinic doors for free care to rescued women. Some businessmen called him crazy. You're going to lose money doing this, they said. He laughed. I've lost worse things, my soul. One cloudy morning, Samuel turned 6 months old. There was a simple cake, crooked candles, and music playing from a Bluetooth speaker. Enrique arrived with a gift wrapped in cloth. Livia opened it. It was a pair of tiny wear-upon shoes, blue, handmade. I made them with the help of an old lady from the nursing home. They're not pretty, but they came from the heart. Lucia cried. Samuel, in her arms, let out a baby giggle, that kind of laugh only babies have, the kind that clears the air. And there, in that little courtyard, the three of them looked at one another. There was no luxury, but there was space. Space in the world, in time, in affection. Enrique spoke, voice thick with emotion. I spent my life trying to buy the future, but you gave me a present no money can buy. Livia took his hand. We don't need to forget what happened. We just need to remember it differently. And Lucia added, pain doesn't define us. What we do with it does. At that moment, the foundation's bell rang, another woman arriving, alone, with a baby in her arms, and a frightened look. Livia went to welcome her, because now she knew what to say, and Samuel, in Enrique's arms, watched it all like someone who understands he came into the world to reunite what was lost. Some people are born invisible, but they weren't born to live in the shadows, and that's what Samuel taught the world. Without knowing how to speak, without knowing how to write, but speaking through his cry, writing with his gaze, Enrique, Livia, and Lucia stayed together, not as a traditional family, but as a true one, the kind born from choice, from pain, and the courage to keep going. The foundation became a national reference. Reports came, awards, interview invitations, but most importantly came mothers, broken girls, hopeless, pregnant with despair, and there they found shelter, warm meals, medical care, but above all, they found someone who would listen. Enrique, once the man who denied care to those without insurance, was now seen serving soup in the waiting line. You know what he said? Sometimes soup heals more than surgery. Livia, once called crazy, was now cited at conferences as a model for public care policies. But she never bragged. She just smiled and answered, "I just do what I wish someone had done for me." Lucia, with her white coat embroidered nurse mom, became a symbol of resilience. And Samuel, Samuel, at 2 years old, he ran around the foundation's yard with a smile that lit up even the darkest corner. But one scene, in particular, became legend around there. It was a regular afternoon. Samuel held a ball in his hand. He saw a young mother sitting alone, crying, curled up. He approached, held out the little ball. She looked at him, confused, and he said, in the garbled words of a toddler, "Don't cry, you got Grandma, and Mommy here." The young woman burst into tears, but this time, they were tears of hope. Enrique, watching from afar, whispered, "That kid's got more wisdom in his pinky than I gathered in 40 years of business." And it was then that he wrote the phrase that would be placed on the foundation's front wall. Big, bold, in worn but eternal letters, "The love you were denied is the same love waiting for you here." Years went by. Samuel grew up. He never knew, in full detail, how much his arrival had changed the world. But he always knew one thing. He was loved, from the day he was found until the last sunset. Because some children are born orphans of parents, but no child deserves to be an orphan of belonging. And some adults only learn what love truly is when they find a baby in the arms of a despised woman on the street. So, my dear listener, next time you walk past someone the world has chosen to ignore, remember Samuel, remember Livia, remember Lucia, remember the man who stopped the car and slammed the brakes on fate. And if this story touched you, leave a comment below. Drop a like to support this channel.